A little bit of maybe almost potential going to be soon, sometime in the near, not so distant future news today. So nothing pressing, but it does come from one of the best sourced journalists on the Kansas City Chiefs for what must be 30 years now. I don't know how long Adam Teicher has been covering the Kansas City Chiefs, but it has been forever. From ESPN, source, Chiefs running back Pacheco, defensive end Omenihu to return to practice. From Adam Teicher, we get the following. Quote, the Kansas City Chiefs designated running back Isiah Pacheco and defensive end Charles Omenihu to return to practice this week, a source said, freeing them to play as soon as Sunday's game against the Bills in Buffalo. Pacheco, the Chiefs' leading rusher the past 2 seasons, has been on the injured reserve list since early in the season with a broken fibula. Omenihu tore his ACL in last season's AFC Championship game and hasn't played this year. Both will be with the Chiefs at practice on Wednesday, the source said. And the Chiefs will have a 3-week window to move them to the active roster. Kareem Hunt has filled in for Pacheco as the Chiefs featured back. He leads the Chiefs in rushing with 449 yards and is tied for the team lead in touchdowns with 5. Pacheco rushed for 830 yards as a rookie in 2022 and 935 yards last season. He rushed for 135 yards in 2 games this season. Omenihu had 7 sacks in 11 games for the Chiefs in 2023, and it's actually more impressive than that. I'll get to that in a moment. His first season with the team, he would give the Chiefs another pass rushing option to go along with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, and recently acquired Joshua Uche and others. What about Cam Thomas? So one thing worth mentioning off the top here, in an interview recently, Andy Reid had said that Juju Smith-Schuster is closer to returning than either Pacheco or Omenihu, and I believe Juju Smith-Schuster is currently listed as doubtful for the Bills game. So this is unlikely to be anything in the immediate future for either of these players, but there is a 3-week window during which they might make their return once they return to practice. Should that window lapse, I don't know the protocol. I have never heard of that happening, but I imagine that the Chiefs are not just doing this haphazardly or willy-nilly. I've got some thoughts on each of these guys returning and what it would mean. The number one thought on Isiah Pacheco, I love Isiah Pacheco as much as anybody, but when he returns, I'm not sure he starts. Now, the numbers are not quite as compelling as once they were. Every game, I believe every game with the exception of one, since Kareem Hunt has been the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs on his second tour in Kansas City, his average has gone down. So he came back absolutely rip-roaring. I believe it was a 4.8, 4.9 yard average in every game subsequently, after which he has rushed for fewer yards per carry. He looks visibly tired on the field. I do not know, to the best of my memory, that I have ever seen Kareem Hunt willingly step out of bounds. He did that against the Broncos. I am not saying any of these things to judge Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is an older guy for a running back in the NFL, and I think part of that is weighing on him, not to mention 20-plus touches every week that he has been in Kansas City during his return. I think Isiah Pacheco probably starts, but that leads us into this number 2 point here. We have seen a lot of interesting formations for Kansas City this season. Andy Reid has really opened things up as far as cluster formations, bunch formations, overloading one side of the line, using multiple tight ends, and so not just using multiple tight ends, using tight ends at multiple levels in these formations. And I think with the return of Isiah Pacheco, we are likely to see a whole lot more of that sort of thing. I think that with the return of Isiah Pacheco, we are likely to see multiple back formations. You have Kareem Hunt and Isiah Pacheco on the field at the same time. It's going to open up some interesting opportunities. I think that the thing you want to see from Kareem Hunt once Isiah Pacheco returns, if there are 25 rushing attempts to go around, maybe Isiah Pacheco gets 15 of them. Maybe Kareem Hunt gets 7 of them. And then you've got a couple for whoever the other running back is. I think Samaje Perine is the most likely running back to be kept on this roster, in addition to Isiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. Well, let's just get into that point next, because I think that there's going to have to be some interesting things going on with the roster. Who gets cut? Now, I think it's possible that for both the return of Charles Omenihu and the return of Isiah Pacheco, it is an offensive player that gets cut, because there was a very heavy overloading of offensive personnel coming into the season. The 53-man roster was bent heavily towards the offense in numbers. I think the most likely name is Carson Steele, just because I don't know if you've still got Clyde Edwards-Helaire sort of in the nether realm someplace. I don't really know where he is as far as numbers are concerned. You have Isiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, which will be kind of dual starters, and then you have Samaje Perine, who is an experienced NFL guy, and he can do anything that it is you would be asking Carson Steele to do. I don't know that Carson Steele obviously is not as well versed in NFL playbooks as is Samaje Perine. I don't know that Samaje Perine is necessarily as strong a blocker as Carson Steele has proven himself to be willing to be, but I think that the likely answer there is Carson Steele, just from a numbers perspective, because the other two names here on the offensive side of the ball, Ethan Driscoll and CJ Hansen, both offensive linemen. The Kansas City Chiefs do have 10 offensive linemen on their active roster. A lot of times you will see them carry 9. I believe for a while there they were carrying 8 a couple years ago. But I don't think they want to have to do that. Both Ethan Driscoll and C.J. Hansen are rookies. C.J. Hansen was a 7th-round draft pick. Ethan Driscoll was a UDFA. Both of those guys, in my opinion, are NFL players. Both of those guys, I think that Ethan Driscoll has upside as an offensive guard. I think that he could be a starter as an offensive guard. C.J. Hansen, I think, has upside at offensive tackle, despite the fact that he is an offensive guard. He does have a lot of maneuverability in his frame. So I think that both of those guys will be kept on the roster, because I think that it is more likely both of those guys are kept on the roster, because I think that they would likely be snatched off of the waiver wire. And this, I just don't know that you get them back if you cut them. Carson Steele, you hate to sound this way, but running backs are a dime a dozen in the NFL. And is he going to pass through waivers? Yeah, I think so. So you could pluck someone off of, if you claim someone off of the waiver wire, I believe they have to go onto your active roster. You could go on to a dozen practice squads in the NFL right now and claim a running back with more speed, if that's what you want, more receiving ability, if that's what you want, more size, if that's what you want, any of these things off of a dozen different practice squads in the NFL right now. So I think that Carson Steele would pass through the waiver wire. Now on to Charles Omenihu. With Charles Omenihu coming back, the pass rush has been very lackluster this season. The past 2 years, with the Chiefs' defensive rise, the sack numbers have been among the best in the NFL. I believe they were first in 2022 and second in 2023. Don't quote me on it, but I believe that's what they are. This season, you can quote me on this, they are 26th. And though the Kansas City Chiefs are holding teams to pretty good, what was it? I said the other day, 18.6, I believe, points per game, which would have gone down since the Broncos game. Though the defense is holding teams to those types of point totals, they are not getting after the quarterback at the rate that they were. Last season for the Kansas City Chiefs, Charles Omenihu played 404 defensive snaps, 404. On those 404 defensive snaps, Charles Omenihu had 5 tackles for loss. That's a tackle for loss every 75 snaps. That's a pretty good number. He had 7 sacks. That's basically a sack every 50 snaps. If you look at it this way, 7 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, and 12 pressures, you were talking about a seriously disruptive character along the defensive line in Charles Omenihu. And it goes to reason. This is the prototypical defensive end for a Steve Spagnuolo defense. He's 6'5", he's 280 pounds, and he has 36-inch arms. That might sound like a weird number to throw out there. 36-inch arm, what are you talking about? Where does that come from? When you talk about the wingspan on a guy that has 3-foot arms, you're talking about someone that is very difficult to run around. You're talking about someone that has a very long reach towards grabbing a quarterback. Sure, you can block Charles Omenihu. Can you maintain his arms inside your frame so that he can't reach those bat wings around you and claw the quarterback anyhow? This is the micro game that is the NFL. Arm length, hand size for an offensive lineman. You got to be able to grab a player's jersey and not let him get away. I am surprised. I know this is a weird sort of tangent here. You've seen those grip strength checkers. I am surprised those have not made their way to the combine, because that would be a very powerful tool for seeing exactly how strong a guy's grip strength is. What can he do with those phalanges? Charles Omenihu's return to the defense is going to open them up to being much more multiple. When you get a guy like Omenihu back, you probably don't have to play Malik Herring for a team's entire closing drive. For the Buccaneers' final drive where they went down and scored that touchdown to tie the game, Malik Herring and FAU were the defensive ends the entire time. So that is troubling to see. Another thing, we have started to see a little bit of Tershawn Wharton fading, not being quite as impactful as he was earlier in the season. It might be that there are some reads out there on him, but it might also be the snap counts weighing on him. So I think getting a guy back like Omenihu, who does have inside versatility, will open things up. I think that the place that you will see the most impact from Charles Omenihu's return is 3rd and long, because you can have Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu, George Karlaftis all on the field. Mike Dana hasn't really, when he returned, even before he was out, he didn't really look the same to me this season, which is troubling because he did just sign that contract. But with Omenihu, Karlaftis, and Chris Jones all on the field in a 3rd and long, you have ultimate versatility as far as who lines up where and what you can do in those spots. And the last thing to talk about with Charles Omenihu here, just like with the offensive side of the ball, returning someone to the active roster means that someone else has to go. Again, I think it is possible that both of the cuts come from the offensive side of the ball, but there are names that are maybe too likely on the defensive side as well. Keith Taylor, I think, is not as strong a candidate to be cut because of the depth issues at the defensive back. He does bring some experience, some knowledge to that defensive secondary. Cam Thomas was a trade acquisition that has not worked out for the Kansas City Chiefs. Marlon Tuipulotu was a waiver wire claim by the Kansas City Chiefs, and I don't know that either of those guys has any reps so far this season. I didn't check. Probably I should have. I apologize. But certainly if they do have reps, they haven't made an impact. So I think that it could be both of those guys, Cam Thomas and Marlon. Now I can't say his first name. Marlon Tuipulotu. Both of those guys are defensive linemen. So the odds on bringing a defensive lineman back, cutting a defensive lineman that isn't doing anything, is probably higher than maybe anything else. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.